Okay, it is Monday, December the 9th, 2019, and it is 8:31 p.m. Welcome to the final week, week 6, the last week for drugs and crimes, J250, and we've been together for the last almost 6 weeks now, 5.5 weeks coming up. And this is the final lecture. I will be discussing the assignments for this week, which you will discover are due on this Friday, 4 days from now, which is the 13th. And that is the final date for all assignments. And you should also be aware of the fact that as of now, I will not accept assignments from 1 to 3. Only assignments 4, 5, and 6, and you will lose points for week 4 and week 5, of course, because week 5's assignments were due yesterday, the 8th, and so now you won't have a late points for week 6's reply post and the assignment due the 13th. You could have a late assignment post, a late assignment grade for not posting your initial post, which of course is due tomorrow night. So let's get right into the module here. Let me share my screen here. Okay, and you've seen this over and over and over. And you're reminded that rubrics are located in the body of each written assignment. I showed them to you every lecture. And then this is a reminder of the schedule. You see week 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then week 6 will be here tonight. And then our announcements. So now let's look at our final announcements for the week. Be reminded of the fact that in Module 6, which is the final one, drug-related criminal activities, treatment and rehabilitation strategies will be presented. Chapter 10 of the textbook, I previously sent you the PowerPoints, and then we're going to go over the activities, treatment challenges related to opioid addiction, and drug treatment rehabilitation programs. And then, well, we will adjourn. Be sure to complete the discussion assignment methadone clinics, which I see some of you have already started to do. Your initial posts are due by tomorrow night, the 10th of the month, and that your reply posts, you see that, are due this Friday, the 13th, not Saturday, the 14th, but Friday the 13th. It's right here. And then your final exam, which is timed, is due by Friday the 13th as well, 11:59 p.m. Central Standard Time. And a reminder that the term officially ends again Friday. So there's no doubt about it. Take the time to complete the end of quarter student evaluations you receive in your email. And then you know about my motto. So now let's take a final look at the course calendar. And you see where we are. Your reading assignment is given, just what we just talked about a few minutes ago. And that's for today. Then your live lecture, then your initial post, and then you see your reply post due the 13th, along with the final exam. You see that there. And then you also see that the course ends on the 13th as well. Your reply post is due the 13th as well. And then your key phrase for the live lecture will be due also Friday the 13th. And that is it. I have had people before try to submit assignments on the 14th. No, it's not going to happen. Be aware of the fact that on the 16th, this is the day that I will be submitting final grades. So by the 17th, you should be able to see and have received your final grades in this course. Okay, so that's it for the calendar. Let's close the course 2s, and let's go right to Module 6. Again, throughout the course, I reminded you of the importance of the drug, crime, and course guide, which I'm not going to click on today, but you know each week it gives you some details about the assignments coming up. So let's take a look at the assignments real quick. Your discussion post dealing with your one side of the argument regarding methadone. So it's all about pros and cons of methadone and methadone clinics. Of course, you know, when your initial post is due, I just said it, but I'll repeat it again. It is due tomorrow night, which is December 10th by 11:59 p.m. Central Standard, and your reply post is due by Friday the 13th at 11:59 p.m. Central Standard Time. And you know my policy and rule about posts. I've already given you my criteria through the rubric, and then I've commented in each of the grades that I've put in so far. Then your final. It's a multiple choice. It's a time exam. It's set for 1 hour. Now, I have been talking about this exam since the beginning, and it involves a comprehensive exam of all of the weeks that you've had in this course. And you'll have it automatically submitted. You cannot and should not have any papers, stickies, Post-it notes, or any of those things. This is a closed book exam. Now, we aren't able to follow you around, but we can certainly tell generally in situations when people have gone and opened their textbooks or have them stacked up on there or have them posted on the wall or whatever. We've seen all kinds of things. So don't do that. And I already talked about from day one about ethics and integrity. And I said if you're an unethical student and you lack integrity as a student, you're also going to ultimately find yourself doing the same thing as a professional, and that can result in some pretty bad situations for you. And then finally, your live classroom lecture. So basically, you should be aware that we're not using the rubric anymore because there's no written assignment. The written assignments are discussion posts and your final exam. That's it for the week. So you don't have to do any more papers. All right? So let's go back and let's talk about what's happening here. So drug treatment programs, as you know, are here to help people, and we're going to talk about some of those things. And the whole idea is to, as it says, to help people so that people won't go out and commit crime to support their drug habits. From day one, I have said that as I reach in here, something annoying me on my desk. And so it is important that you understand that it is imperative to adversely affect the repeat offenders or recidivists is to get them delivered from drugs. And usually that's done through some very tough, hard-hitting drug treatment programs. And unfortunately, one of the problems with drug treatment programs, as you should know, is the budgetary restraint issue. And it is really kind of crazy because I tell people, I said, do we really want to reduce crime? Wish we could eliminate it, but that's not going to happen. But do we really want to reduce it? take a big bite out of crime, like that crime dog McGruff says, then begin to treat people for their addictions so that they aren't going to commit crimes to support their habits. That will be a big, big, big benefit. I once heard a judge say, the late R. Eugene Pincham, who was my mentor, who was a great criminal defense trial lawyer in our jurisdiction here in Illinois, particularly in Cook County, but he tried cases all over the place in federal court as well as in the United States Supreme Court. Judge Pincham used to always say to us, he says, you know, it's cheaper to educate than to incarcerate. And he carried that out by a program that he had that initiated in his courtroom, room 702 at the, what's called the Layton Courthouse. We call it 26 in California, in Chicago, our main courthouse in Cook County, where he had a program called Probation Challenge that came out of there. And what it did, and I've talked about this before, it qualified individuals who were eligible for probation and convicted of nonviolent offenses of the opportunity to go to school if they had not obtained their high school diplomas or their GED, but to give them the option to seek to get a GED, which is a general education degree, and I think diploma, general education diploma is what it's called. And so give them the opportunity. And many people who went through that. However, many individuals who had other problems, no matter how much you educated them, if you didn't address those who were addicts, who were hooked on drugs, who would constantly be released, commit crimes, get arrested, get incarcerated, get released, and the reason is because they're supporting their habit. And so here we come to drug treatment programs. I've already talked to you about the law enforcement approach dealing with deflection. I talked about that the last couple of weeks, where individuals, rather than incarcerating these individuals through police and law enforcement, instead to direct them to drug treatment programs, because it's more beneficial to the community and to society again. So so we're going to deal with the issues of the different standards and the differences between with the treatment program and the philosophies, and we're going to deal with some of the treatments relating to heroin and opioid addiction and the impact on recidivism. And then finally, we're going to discuss development and use of how drug courts operate. And I'm very well familiar with that. I spent a lot of time representing people in drug court, and the impact upon incarceration and recidivism rates. So here are your assignments. We're going to talk about this and this. I already talked about this and the final and this. So now let's dive right into what I said I was going to talk about in detail. First of all, we have a crisis. Professor Wright, you sound like a broken record. Yes, it's because of the fact that it's a true thing and needs to be drummed into not just the head, but to the heart and the spirit of law enforcement professionals and criminal justice professionals in general, that the opioid addiction is a terrible thing. Those of you who recall from last week, week 5, Chasing the Dragon gave you an in-depth analysis and understanding of what happens in real life to people, and how people find themselves innocently graduating to using opioids, and how it adversely affected the family relationships and all those different things. And so then these people are, should I say, cast away. Nobody wants to be bothered with them. And oftentimes these people end up ODing, and they find themselves with the only friends that they really have are their fellow junkies and drug users. And so they don't fit in with anybody else. And so it is important, though, for us to deal with this issue and meet it head on, so that these individuals can get these relationships repaired. And it is in the best interest of our communities to do so. After all, I don't want somebody breaking into my house, not because they want my stuff, but because they are looking for stuff to be able to fence and to sell to support their drug habits. And so, and there's also an adverse effect on insurance as well. People filed insurance claims for breaking and entering and burglaries that take place for loss of property. And when that happens, the rates go up for everybody, because the rates based upon claims that you not know is how it operates. So when you file a claim, your rate goes up, but so too do the other parties as well, particularly when it's a catastrophic thing like a hurricane or something like that. So anyway, opioid addiction, as it says, also has some very significant physical and psychological challenges. And, you know, as it starts innocently and gets to the point where the person has to have it in order to live. And as I said before, what happens is people start out with a low dose, and they get high, and they want to try to reach that high again, and the only way they can do it is to increase the dose and keep increasing it and keep increasing it until they either OD or either they OD and they just die. So it says as people discontinue use of drugs, physical challenges take place, including, you know, how people operate when they start to want to come off of these drugs. They deal with restlessness, muscle and bone pain. It's funny, I have muscle and bone pain, but mine comes from being 69 years old. I don't use those drugs. In fact, I've gone on record and said, and I told my doctor, and I told my wife, I says, I don't like to take painkillers. I very sporadically take painkillers. There are people who take painkillers and they pop it like candy, but after what happens is their body builds up a tolerance for it, and they keep finding themselves, and they end up continuing to take more and more to alleviate muscle and bone pain. I'll take the pain. Insomnia, where people can't sleep. They have excessive diarrhea, vomiting, flashes and sweating and stuff like that. I have what we call night sweats, but that has something to do with my age, I was told. But the point of the matter is there are people who just break out into sweats. It could be below zero, and they'll break out in sweats. And these people who are using these drugs, these are just some of the symptoms that you witness and that you see that individuals have. And so here we come with operating with various types of methods to try to ameliorate this opioid issue or this drug problem. And one of the prescribed medications is bromphene and methadone. And methadone is one of the things that if you should be aware of. It is basically exchanging one drug for another. I consider methadone as very dangerous. I've said this in my posts, and I've said it to students down through the years. I've watched people go to methadone clinics, and methadone is highly, I said highly addictive. And people have to go there for their fix. If they don't get their fix, then they're going to have some problems. And there are a lot of clinics where opioid, well, not opioid, addicts go to get their fix of methadone. And it says here methadone is also detected in opioid on drug tests for employment, and using methadone doesn't eliminate the possibility of using other opioids. So here's the point. I tell people it's like a rubber band, not a rubber band, a Band-Aid over a issue that needs to be resolved. Again, exchanging one drug for another, and I hear people say, oh, methadone is not as bad as the other. But I've seen people die from methadone as well. And so I don't care for methadone at all. Another point that's brought out here is that all it does is postpone the effort of abstaining and recovery. And that's probably one of the most challenging things that individuals have, is detoxing, so to speak. Is that what methadone does is that it basically delays that action, and but it's going to still require a lot of counseling, attending meetings, getting a sponsor, and you need a support system in terms of these individuals. And so that's how you're really going to help. And it says here in the final sentence here that I have here, well, not the final, but it says, some studies have indicated that over 70% of people, pay attention to what I'm about to say, elapse or relapse after stopping the use of methadone. So what I'm trying to say is methadone is kind of like a placeholder, but then when they don't get their fix of methadone, then they go back to doing what they were doing before that. And it's like delaying the inevitable. So there's a whole lot of things that you can take a look at. And again, there's a nice video here, which we're not going to put this in, but this is actually the link that you can take a look at this and streaming video, Chasing Heroin. So you can take a look at this video. It's really a pretty long video, and if you were to click on it, it's pretty long. It's pretty long. So you can see this, but I'm not going to put it up now. But when you see it, you'll see some of the same type of things that you saw in Chasing the Dragon as well. Okay. So we come down to the point of what do we do with drug treatment and programs. As those of you who are familiar with AA, Alcoholics Anonymous, they have this 12-step program that people go through these various steps in terms of treating themselves for alcohol and for drugs. But be aware of the fact that probably one of the most important things that is needed to help individuals is not out, what do you call, I call it out-of-house treatment, but outpatient treatment basically is not going to help you, because during that time people are going to cheat, and they're going to go and they're going to do what they need to do to get a fix. But inpatient treatment, where a person is kept over a long period of time, and as it says, it can be up to a year. But these programs focus on helping people change their behavior, but it's kind of expensive as well. The short-term residential treatment is generally what people end up with, and it deals with, as I was talking about earlier, detoxification, or with medical management withdrawal. In other words, getting you to go through. You're going to go through this all the changes that a person goes through when their body is coming off of this. And if you could imagine a person who's trying to lose weight, it's a challenge. And you go through fasting, you go through cutting down your food intake, and your body is still telling you it wants more. But then you have to combine it with exercise and eat in moderation the right foods as well at the right times. So it's the same kind of thing we're talking about here, except it's more intensified when you're dealing with medical managed withdrawal. And then it says residential treatment aids in preparing individuals to return to community, and then the stay is usually 30 days. Well, I have seen people go in 30 days and come back out after 30 days, and they go right back to doing what they need to do. So it takes more than 30 days, but let me say this. It depends on the individual. It depends on the commitment of the individual. And don't feel like just because a person has a strong support system that they may not appreciate and use it. Remember, these are sick individuals, and they don't have the ability to appreciate when someone is helping them because their body is telling them what to do. They're out of control. They have no freedom. It's like in being incarcerated in a situation where you can't get out. You can't break out of it. So it takes a lot of time, and it's very, 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 very tedious. Group counseling, it says, is often used in addition to individual counseling because what you do is you need someone to be accountable to you. You need to be able to have someone to be there with you because some of those situations are really, really tough. And let me tell you something. There's a lot of people who don't really want to be bothered with people when they're going through those things. But it is very, 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 very important. It says here that peers play a strong role as a part, and that's people who have actually gone through and actually come out. They talk about AA and other 12-step programs provide this, where the peers are there because they've been there, done that, been through it, and are saying, this is how you do it. And it's like a coach. It's like a coach to help you lose weight, put you on a diet, to keep you mindful of your goal and set a goal for you. Remember, everybody is different, and there's no standard one way to do any of this. For opioid addiction, there's medication-assisted treatment with methadone I already talked about, bromphene and extended release and injectable naloxone. But remember, once again, the use of these medications, all they do is ease the symptoms of withdrawal and sickness, and they're supposed to quicken the transition. But once again, the key thing, especially with methadone, like I said, I already gone on record to talk about that. The key thing is that these people need something to help them. It's just like a person, when you go into surgery, you don't just start cutting. You have to, and I always miss this word, give them an anesthetic. Okay, my tongue gets twisted trying to say that. But give them an anesthetic so that it deadens the pain as you go through. My wife had to go to the dentist the other day, and they gave her Novocaine shots. And then after the surgery was done, the root canal, a few hours later, she was screaming and hollering and had to take her medication for pain. And so that's the kind of thing. I remember when I went for years ago hernia surgery, and I was gonna be, this is not gonna bother me. And before we got home, because it was an outpatient thing, I was there. The surgery was done, and they let me go home the same day. But here's what I'm getting ready to tell you. And so I didn't feel nothing when we left out, but I was told, yeah, you wait till you get out of here. And a few hours later, I was asking my wife, could you please help me with get those pills? And I had to take, because it was like, man, it was unbearable pain. My point is, it's the same kind of thing that we're talking about when we're dealing with individuals who are trying to go through opioid addiction or any other kind of addiction that they're dealing with, whether it's heroin or whatever it is. And so we conclude the 12 steps. And the 12 steps of AA are kind of, it reminds me as a minister, as a pastor, of some biblical things that are involved in here. And you will see it starting with point number 1. First, you got to admit that you're powerless over alcohol or whatever the substance, and that your life is out of control. So in other words, you have to admit you have a problem and need help. That applies to drugs as well as alcohol. You have to hit sometimes, as they say, rock bottom to be able to recognize that I have no other choice. This is the only way I can go. And so there's the serenity prayer that, if you know about it, tells you to learn to accept the things you cannot change. And there's some more to it, and I don't remember all the details, but just look it up. It's called the Serenity Prayer, and you'll see what I'm talking about. So the first step is admitting you have a problem, and you've hit the level where there's no way to go except to get that help. Second, believe that a power greater than you can restore it. Now, that's where we start to get into the spiritual realm. And, I, as a Christian, use God. But at the same time, I always tell people doctors work hand in hand with that. So believe that you don't have the ability to say no. That's why I tell people, people say no to drugs. It's not as easy once you've gone down the road and you become hooked on it. Then number 3, make a decision to turn over your will and life to the care of God as we understood him. And that's, like I said again, recognizing that there's a power greater, and in this, the AA uses the term God. Now, there are people who don't believe in God. That's okay. That's your choice. That's your right. You can do that. But the point of the matter is that they're suggesting. Some people might call him Allah. Some call him other names. The point of the matter is it's recognizing that there's a power that's greater than us. And personally, as a Christian, I believe in number 3. Number 4, making a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. In the Bible, we always talk about people, when we deal with communion, we tell people, let a man examine himself or herself. And what you want to do is search your own self. Where are you? And assess where you are. And then admit, and here we go to God and to ourselves and to other individuals, human beings, the exact nature of our wrongs. And in other words, accept responsibility. Now, that's when you're heading in the right direction. It's not very, very easy to do that, but it takes time and a lot of work. You see, we're dealing with accountability we're building up here. Number 6, we're entirely ready to have God remove. In other words, as we say as Christians, take it away from us. Turn us into new creatures. That's how we say it in the Bible. And what we're really saying is cleanse us of all these things that are hurting us, and help us to be the way we were when we were born. 7, be humble. Be humble. Humble, not arrogant. Humble in terms of activities. And that's one of the things that we biblically, again, talk about. There's a scripture in the Bible about that, 2 Chronicles 7:14, But I'm just trying to get you guys to understand the importance of seeing that with AA, what they are really saying is that there's a power greater than you that can help you and help you to recognize that you need help. Make a list of all persons you've harmed and become willing to make amends to them. Those are the kind of things. It's not because you can imagine down through the years you have maybe even killed somebody when you didn't intend to, because you were trying to get something for your habit, or you have robbed someone. You might have stolen from your own mother or your own spouse. Taken things out of the house, or broken into neighbor's house, friend's house, your pastor's house, your friend, anybody. Make direct amends to such people whenever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. So you want to stop hurting people. Number 10, continue to take personal inventory when you were wrong and admit it. Again, accept the fact that you did wrong. That goes to what we call basic repentance in terms of criminal justice. Individuals, when they're sentenced and they come before the judge, oftentimes there's a determination made by the trier of fact, particularly the judge, as to whether or not that person is of a repentant spirit, admitting that they are sorry about what they did, and not to do it, as we say, not sorry for the record, but hard sorry, so that it's on the inside of you. I'm not trying to give you a biblical teaching. I'm just trying to explain to you how deep this thing actually goes in terms of getting it done. Then it talks about seeking out prayer and meditation to improve your conscious contact with God. Again, I'm not apologizing for it, because of the fact that that's what I believe in, and you're free to believe in whatever you do. Praying only to acknowledge of His will for us and the power to carry that out. That's how we as Christians try to tell people that we try to live our lives. And then the final one is having a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps. So this is carried out to alcoholics to practice in all their affairs, everything they do. Same thing with drugs, is that you got to get people to turn. I say do a 180. There are a lot of people say, "Oh, we want you to do a 360." Realize what you say when you say someone does a 360. When I tell somebody I want them to go in a new direction, and I tell them to do it a 360, I'm saying you go around the circle and come right back where you were. No, you want to go a 180 so that you're going in the opposite direction of the way you were going. And that's what people need to find themselves in. And so this 12-step and variations of it are used in many types of recovery programs. There's always going to be some recognition in the recovery programs, drugs and alcohol, that there's a power greater than you, and you need to hook on to it, because obviously you made it a shipwreck. And so those are just some of the things. Again, you want to take the time to go back, and you can check Chasing Heroin. You're going to see the same kind of things that you saw with last week's course. So with that, I'm going to say the key phrase I want you to give me is one that you should be familiar with from this week's assignment: methadone. That's what I want you to give me. Give me that, and you get your points. Those are your final points that you get for the live lecture. And of course, those are due by this Friday. So I do want to, before I say goodnight to you, wish you each the best in your future classes. I'm sure I'll run across many of you down the road, especially in J280, Contemporary Issues in Criminal Justice. I'll run across some of you in the bachelor program as I teach constitutional law. I teach evidence. I also teach another survey course like critical issues in contemporary issues in criminal justice. It used to be called critical issues in criminal justice, but they did away with that course. But there are other courses that I will be teaching. I have thoroughly enjoyed each of you these last 6 weeks. I do hope that you now coming in have your eyes open as criminal justice professionals as to the seriousness of the relationship between drugs and crime, and that you as a future law enforcement people, particularly corrections people, probation officers, parole officers, and other first responder people, firefighters and so forth, you're going to recognize that you're going to end up becoming like a social worker, and you're going to have to deal with people who are whacked out on drugs, and you're going to have to do things to point them in a direction where they can get help. And that's going to be a part of your job. And so this course should teach you to be a little more sensitive. There are a lot of people who think people should be locked up forever. Well, I'm not talking about the people who are distributors. Now, let me explain to you, there are different levels of distribution. There are individuals who distribute drugs because they are hooked on it, and that's how they pay for their habits. But that's a dangerous practice. They always say that a drug user who is a dealer is a person who is disastrous to themselves and to others. But I'm not talking about those cartels or those organizations like that. I'm simply talking about the people. Remember what I said weeks ago. If we get treatment for the customers, they'll be just like other types of businesses that have gone by the wayside because the demand has decreased or there's no demand at all. And so that's the exact issue and the resolution it's going to take to deal with the drug issue. So I'm going to say good night to each of you, and I look forward to seeing you down the road. Remember, there are going to be many of you who come back to me after you've taken a few of my courses, and you're going to ask me for letters, a recommendation. You're going to ask me to make calls. I'm really ready to do it, but just remember, it's about the effort. And I'm going to go back and I'll check to see what kind of student. And actually, to be honest with you, I have a pretty good memory when it comes to students. And just because you had a challenge, and you know, I had one student who went from academic probation, where I worked with him and mentored him, and he's in the bachelor program. When I first met him, was in Introduction to Corrections, and he made it through that class with I mean, it was hard, but I let him know how to, and helped him. I didn't do his work. I just pointed him in a direction and let him know that you can do better. You can do better. And so I do that with my students. I want to see student success. That is my goal. And my contribution to the criminal justice profession is to provide, as I said, and I close by saying this, ethical, professional, and educated criminal justice individuals. Okay, good night.